Hello. I thought I'd do something a little more lighthearted today, so the documentaries I've chosen aren't as disturbing as my last countdown. Instead of judging them based on things like structure, I'm doing a countdown of how out there I found them. It had been a while since I'd done a soft-spoken video when I did my last countdown. It's kind of hard for me to speak too softly because I have a deep voice. I also have the zest for life of a necrotic toe, and I can't be bothered to inflect more enthusiastically. I tried faking a softer voice in my older videos and I sounded stupid as fuck, so I won't be doing that anymore. The first documentary is the most uplifting one on the list and the one I enjoyed best. It's from 1999 and it's called Genghis Blues, directed by Roko Belic. Its subject is a blind blues musician named Paul Pena, and it documents his participation in a throat singing competition all the way in Tuva, a remote republic in southern Siberia. This incredible human being taught himself the ancient art of throat singing before the days of the internet without a single lesson from a professional, just by buying records and listening to them day in and day out. When he attends a throat singing concert, he meets the legendary Kongar ul Ondar, who is probably the best known throat singer to the Western world. After the concert, Pena impresses Ondar with his singing abilities, and he's invited to perform at the most popular throat singing festival in Ondar's homeland. Genghis Blues highlights Pena's trip with the documentary crew and the festival where he honors and astounds the Tuvan people. For the most part, this is a feel-good movie, but it does have its sad moments. Everything seems to go well during and shortly after the festival, but eventually, Pena and the crew run into hurdles and they can't make it back to California in time. At one point, Pena runs out of his psych meds, which sends him into a panic and leads him to share his struggles with mental health. He divulges that he has chronic depression, and while he and everyone else is waiting to go back home, he writes a song about feeling like a burden to society. It's a shame that someone with such a bright spirit felt this poorly about themselves. People like him are rare and don't deserve to feel alienated from other people, especially because he brought so much happiness to the world with his talent and enthusiasm. He could have chosen to be a miserable, distant person, but he so badly fought to connect with people in spite of his limitations. He put a smile on my face many times, and I loved seeing him light up when he finally met the musicians he'd spent hours listening to. His friendship with Ondar was so wholesome. I think I got a violent rush of serotonin every time I watched these two interact. Throat singing is something else, you guys. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's a very ancient, unique art form. I remember watching a YouTube video that mentioned how in ancient times, a specific ethnic group from Central Asia would go to battle and throat sing in unison to intimidate their enemies. Can you imagine? People like Pena are hard to come by, especially in this day and age, so if you're feeling particularly misanthropic, I'd urge you to check this out. It might rekindle your hope in humanity. Unfortunately, Pena died in 2005. He was only 55. Ondar died in 2013 and was only 51 years old. The second documentary is The Wild and Wonderful Whites of West Virginia by Julien Nitzberg from 2009. If profanity, drunken hijinks, and drug use offend you, you're not going to want to watch this. The movie follows the notorious white family of West Virginia, who the police department of their county are quite familiar with. They take pride in their humble roots as the children and grandchildren of renowned coal miner and dancer D. Ray White. D. Ray White became popular for his unique style of clog dancing, also known as clogging. Clogging in the United States is a style of folk dance that comes from the Appalachian Mountains and has roots in Scottish, English, and Irish tap dancing. His sons continued the tradition, but none of them went as far with it as Jesco White, who's known as the dancing outlaw. The movie is essentially a chaotic jumble of anecdotes, drinking and drugging, erratic, rage-fueled car rides, and lots of bragging about how tough these people think they are. Objectively, this is not a well-made documentary, but it's the one on the list that elicited the strongest reaction from me. On top of being all over the place and not focusing enough on the family's history, it's exploitative to the point of being uncomfortable. It feels like an episode of Jackass, but that's most likely because Johnny Knoxville and Jeff Tremaine produced this. My neighbor is drumming, but he has a right to live, so we're just gonna move on. You see full-grown adults brag about their drug use like if they're the cool kids in high school. Middle-aged looking women flash their tits and snort drugs in the same room where they've just given birth. I wouldn't enjoy being around these people for a second. Hopefully they've changed, especially because they're a lot older now. You can say what you want, but when you know the history of Appalachia, you can't deny that these people have been grossly used and abused by capitalist greed, especially coal miners like D. Ray White and other blue-collar people. When I thought about why these people behaved so distastefully, it helped me feel sympathy. When I finished the movie, I watched an interview with Mamie White, one of White's daughters. She's featured in this film. And she talked about how she had to kill and cook her own food as a little girl, and she and her siblings were so poor that they had to go to school without shoes on when it snowed. So what do you do when you're sick of being taken for a ride? A lot of people in West Virginia learned that in order to survive, your best bet is to cheat the welfare system. I'm not gonna make judgments because I don't know all the details. Mining is a thankless job that sends people to their graves when they're as young as 40. It's worth mentioning that when you cheat to gain, it comes with detriments, right? It becomes all too easy to perpetuate a culture of complacency and solidify a total lack of respect, for authority when you feel disaffected. This family, unfortunately, is a prime example of that. He's going in, he's having a little party over there, you hear that? Oh, he stopped. Living in a place where corruption has robbed you and your loved ones of better opportunities will wear you down, so I can sympathize, but watching kids smoke cigarettes in front of these adults without repercussions, that's totally inexcusable. Generational trauma is not a joke. Sometimes people do the best with what they have, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad people. I know in my heart that just like the crack epidemic, what was done to the Appalachian people and Making them dependent on opioids and welfare was by design. If you want to call me a conspiracy theorist, you can check the links in the description to educate yourself. Fortunately, a couple of the people in the movie have turned their lives around. I saw a really cute clip here on YouTube of Jesco White caressing his pet chihuahua. I think he's too old and tired at this point to keep sniffing glue. 3 of the women are apparently sober, and some of their children are active on social media, and they bring awareness to generational trauma and mental health issues. If you're into doom metal, the soundtrack features an Electric Wizard song, and Hank Williams III makes a couple of appearances. I see that I have subscribers from places like Finland and Vietnam, which is so cool. But be aware that this dialect of English was kind of hard for me to understand at some points, and I'm a native speaker, so it might not be watchable for you unless you can find it with subtitles or closed captions. I had to watch it with the volume turned way up. The final and most wacky documentary is Marwencol from 2010, directed by Jeff Malmberg. This one's about a man named Mark Hogenkamp and his fictional world of Marwencol. Marwencol blends the names Mark, Wendy, and Colleen. He has spent countless hours making up stories about and photographing the different characters that inhabit this world. Many of them are based on people in his real life, but the hero of this world is himself in the World War II era. When Mark was 38 years old, he was beaten senseless by a group of 5 men after a night of drinking at the bar. The attack was so brutal that he fell into a coma for 9 days. Immersing himself in his fictional world was his way of regaining memories and dexterity, because he had lost so much of his memory and sense of self. He'd actually been an alcoholic, a mean one according to his friends, but that changed after the attack. Despite the changes in his personality, there's one part that remained, a unique propensity that is suspected to have motivated the attack. I'm not gonna lie, I felt uncomfortable many times while watching. The way he interacts with and speaks about women is strange, but I had to remind myself that he'd experienced a traumatic brain injury. There's a movie from 1995 called Heavy that kind of reminds me of this one. I did a video about it, but I ended up deleting it because even though it's a harmless little movie, the main character's behavior is undeniably creepy. It's not okay to spy on people without them knowing and secretly steal pictures of them. The only reason why I didn't take issue with it is because it's a movie, and I was privy to the main character's intentions in a way that real life wouldn't allow, you know? I don't believe in giving men the benefit of the doubt if their behavior is unacceptable, brain injury or not, and if you knew some of the things I've had to deal with, you'd probably understand why I felt the need to make it clear and why I deleted the video. I mean, I feel like a lot of crazies misconstrue when women are nice to them. I'm not gonna get into that. Anyway, it reminded me of Heavy because they both take place in upstate New York, and they both center on reclusive men who work as cooks at diners. You know, people with brain injuries are also capable of deviancy, so I'd like to hope Mark's behavior was just weird, silly fun, but again, very uncomfortable at times. I wish the directors had interviewed the people around him more. It would have been nice to get more insight on who he was. His mom makes a quick cameo in the beginning, but then she just disappears. And if I'm not mistaken, he was living with her, so who better to interview than her? A lot of you might find this one boring because it focuses a lot on the lore of Marwencol. And again, we don't get to know much about who he was before the incident, but it kept me engaged. I think the vodka I was drinking helped. I don't know if I would have enjoyed this had I been sober, but it was another reminder to appreciate the times I've escaped being brutalized and put into a coma, so there's that. It took some effort to put my judgment aside, but I reminded myself that there are 1,000,001 reasons why people do the silly things they do, and we should always be curious about each other, you know? I'll always have my misgivings about men like Mark. That'll never change, but that's where curiosity helps. I tend to give most people chances depending on my observations. Sometimes I don't, but that's fine. It's always better to be safe than sorry, you know? I always get misjudged as a stuck-up bitch, but I mean, every time I leave my bed I'm fucking miserable, and I doubt that'll change anytime soon, but fortunately there have been people who have looked past that and made an effort to get to know me better. I've been dealing with an iatrogenic brain injury for the past 5 years, and I doubt I'll ever be the same. I'm blessed in that I can still function, and I'm nowhere near as bad as Mark, so it could always be worse, and this documentary reminded me of that. You guys probably think I'm annoying because I've said this ad nauseum, but you've got to be grateful for the life you have, and you have to empower and remind yourself that you have a choice to want better for yourself. Nobody can fix your problems but you, and you have to make a very strong effort to look at the bright side every single day. I know it feels like a chore, but you have to do chores, right? I know it's not easy when you're severely depressed, so I'd encourage you to look into CBT and DBT techniques for that. If Mark could rewire his brain to heal his physical and cognitive impairments, you absolutely can train yourself to be in a better place mentally. Mark is still doing his thing and keeping Marwencol alive, but I hope he's doing a lot better now. Thanks for your time. Bye.